Yeah, all right, so let's go. We're back.
Guess
We're
who's
both on Uma.
Back again. But before we get started back into the boat work, having just finished a sailing trip to the BVIs, we wanted to go over some of the tips and tricks that we've learned over the years.
We've been in the British Virgin Islands a couple times. The first time was when we first started sailing on our boat back in 2016.
Yeah.
And then the second time was with the epic Odyssey Festival where we had 12 catamarans sailing together. That was a lot. And then again, we were in the BVIs for almost 10 days on the voyage catamarans with our friends Boy and Brandy.
And Maya.
And
then this last time was 2 boats, 16 patrons, and 2 cooks. So we've been there 4 times, 4 very different trips. And we've picked up a lot of tips and tricks along the way. So we're going to try to share with you what we've learned and the things that we wish people told us before the first time we went sailing in the BVIs.
All right, let's start with the most important point, the things that keeps us alive.
The thing that makes or breaks any sailing adventure.
Yeah, that is food. Provisioning in the BVIs is an adventure in itself. When we first got there with Uma, we were actually quite shocked about how expensive things in the grocery stores were. If you're used to grocery shopping in America or even in Europe, it is quite a difference between there and in the BVIs.
Yeah, and we were coming from Puerto Rico, and so we were paying basically U.S. prices.
Walmart.
And the U.S. Virgin Islands also aren't that expensive. And then you sail 10 minutes into the BVIs, and all of a sudden they're like 2 to 3 times more expensive at the grocery store. So that was the first shock. We also learned very early on that there's 2 main grocery stores in Road Town, and you should buy all your groceries there. Once you leave the main island and outside of Road Town, there are like little grocery stores and little places you can provision, but they're very small. They're like sort of gas station convenience store style, and they're even more expensive than Road Town itself. So if you can plan and provision all of your food and buy all of it when you first get there before you get on the boats, then you'll save yourself a ton of money.
Yeah, and I think when we were there with Uma, it was a little bit more... We were a bit more flexible with what we ate.
We were also, is that how you're going to say flexible?
Because
we were
didn't
poor.
eat.
We were very poor when we sailed through the BVIs the first time, and we lived on like mangoes and fish for a week because we couldn't afford any of the food at the grocery store.
Yeah, but then when we got back, we were part of a bigger flotilla, and that's when we learned that you can get your food delivered to the boat, which made a huge difference, especially when you're dealing with, 12 different boats and each boat having their different provisioning list.
Yeah, and different menus and everything. That was actually kind of cool. So if you're like a small group of people, it's probably worth just going to the grocery store yourself. But if you're thinking about doing a larger event or you're going to have a cook on board, just send them because they know what they're going to be cooking and they can do all the provisioning at the grocery store, pick out everything they need, and then the grocery stores will deliver all of that to your boat, and it just saves an entire day worth of work.
That's what we did for the Odyssey Festival, and we were there with the voyage catamaran. We actually anchored near the cruise ship port. Took the dinghy to shore, and then did all of our provisioning there at the big grocery store in Road Town. Because from the marina, there's a bit of a long way to get there. But if you're anchoring right in front of the cruise ship, then it's an easy dinghy ride.
And then with the Uma Nation meetup that I just came back from, it was the same thing. The cooks took care of all the provisioning, all the planning for the meals and the prep, and then the grocery stores delivered everything to the boat before we left. So you can tell them what time you want to be there, and they bring you all your food. It's just one less thing to worry about.
A lot of the charter companies and the BVIs provide their own cooks, or they have recommendations. And I think when you're dealing with a larger group of people, it makes a big difference, because while the cook is prepping and planning and taking care of all the cooking on board, you have time to actually sail and go explore, and you don't have to worry about spending hours prepping food for everyone. So I feel like that makes things a little bit more...
vacation-y?
Yeah, more like a vacation.
The smaller group, like when we were hanging out with Bo and Brandy and Maya, it was fine because we could all kind of like cook family style. One person would cook one meal, and then the other people would, clean up and wash dishes after. But when you're cooking and prepping for 10 or 14 people and then doing all the dishes after, it's a full-time job. So for us, at least, we have that many people, it's definitely worth bringing the cook on board, because then we can just enjoy the vacation more and we don't have to worry about washing dishes and, peeling carrots and stuff like that. So, and yeah, the charter companies usually, if you're not doing just a bare boat, you can get recommendations from them, and they will have a list of good cooks that have worked on these boats before. and it works out really well.
Yeah. But if you are going to the BVIs, just ask for Tisha because she's the best. She's our girl. She's the best.
Busy. We've got her on retainer. So yeah, I think the main tip there is Provision and Road Town. It's the only like decent big grocery stores in the BVIs, and they're much cheaper, even though they're more expensive than you might be used to at home. And that way, you're good for the week.
Speaking of expenses, let's talk about mooring balls, because in the BVIs, mooring balls are very common. In fact, I mean, I think everybody that goes to their BVIs eventually grabs a mooring ball there anyway.
Kind of all the best anchorages have been filled with mooring balls, which we kind of get because if you don't know what you're doing, anchoring can often damage the ocean floor if there's coral or seagrass or anything down there. And so we kind of get why they put mooring balls in. And the mooring fees also tends to go towards maintaining the parks, maintaining the mooring balls. And there's a lot of boats that go through the BVIs every year. We do get it, but the mooring fees are also going up every year. They're kind of expensive, and all the boats come with an anchor, which is free. And so for us, at least this last time in the BVIs with 2 boats, if we were getting moorings every night, it would have probably cost us close to $1,000. So the good news is if you're crafty and you're good at reading a chart and paying attention to the weather, you can anchor everywhere. Like there's always an anchorage nearby. It might be a bit swelly, but some of the mooring fields are kind of swelly too.
Yeah, when we were there with Uma, we grabbed mooring balls because we honestly thought it was the only way that you could visit the islands. Mm-hmm. But we were a little bit crafty, which is not something that we would recommend.
Crafty.
We're a little bit flexible.
We're a little bit illegal. Yeah, there are different mooring balls with different colors, and you should learn what they are before you go. The white ones with blue stripes tend to just be first come, first serve, and someone comes around in a boat and collects the fee. And there's not really a fixed fee for those. Sometimes they're more expensive, sometimes they're less expensive, depending on what bay you're in. There are like orange ones. There's an app called Boaty Ball, and you can go on and you can see the mooring field, and you can reserve one. Those are a little bit more expensive, but at least you get that sort of guarantee that you're going to have a spot when you get there. This last time with the Uma Nation meetup, we kind of made it a point to raft up every night, which meant not getting on mooring balls because you're not supposed to do that on a mooring ball. So we found unique places to anchor and unique techniques to anchor. And we only ended up grabbing a mooring one night in front of Ivan's because that bay is just really crowded and very small to anchor. So that was a pretty good time, and it was fun to raft up every night, which is something we couldn't do if we were on a mooring ball. That's
the beauty about the BVIs. The mooring balls are there for you if you don't feel like anchoring, and sometimes it's just easier to just grab a mooring ball and be done with it. Also, because when you grab a mooring ball, a lot of times somebody comes in and gives you ice or takes care of your trash bags, and then you just pay a fee. But the beauty is you don't have to always get a mooring ball. And if you feel like anchoring, just look at your charts. There's a lot of areas that are maybe not in the tourist guides, but that they're really protected and they're beautiful areas.
If any of you guys have tips to pick up a mooring ball solo on a catamaran, love to hear it, because we can do it on a monohull just fine. But Luke and Margot and I were having this discussion because it's easy when you have like 5 people on the bow and every single person has a job. Mm-hmm. But we were trying to strategize, like, what if you had to do it by yourself? Like, how would you pick up a mooring ball on a catamaran solo?
I feel like I would do it the same way that we did it with Uma. Oh, because you're on top.
Yeah, you're really far from the water.
That's right. You can't
so
just
if anybody on
go
like
downstairs
on like a big like a Bali or a Voyager Lagoon or a Leopard or something like that. If any of you guys have a tip for like how you've done it, not like hypothetical, but if you've actually picked up a mooring ball solo, we'd love to hear it because it's a skill that neither of us have even attempted. Oh. But I'm sure there's a strategy out there somewhere. So.
Bonfires is a tricky subject because we all love beach bonfires. In the Bahamas, we've had bonfires.
Bonfires.
We've had
we did have some
bonfires almost every single night, and it's great for cooking, it's great for socializing. In the BVIs, it's tricky because it's very much illegal.
Doesn't mean you can't have them.
Doesn't mean you can't have
Just because it's illegal doesn't mean you can't have one.
There's ways you can have bonfires in the BVIs, and one of the ways is just to hire somebody on island that has a permit, and then you can have a designated beach where he comes in and then have a bunch
A bunch fire.
it's like beach bonfire. It's a bunch fire.
Bunch fire. I like it.
I like it. I'll just start saying that. You can have a fire on the beach that you choose. The other option is what you did with the
the restaurant put on the bonfires, so they had their permit. So the thing with the bonfires and the BVIs is you need a permit, and they cost quite a lot of money. And so one person gets a permit, and then they can go around and have bonfires. So it's one of the things where if you're going through a charter company, let them know that you're interested, and they'll have a list of people who can do it for you, and you can pick what beach you want a bonfire on, and they'll bring out the wood, and I mean, everything costs money. But when you're at a restaurant or a hotel that's putting on a bonfire already, that's sort of the best way to do it, because you can kind of get it for free, so to speak, in a way.
But it's no guarantee you'll have it, right?
Yeah, but definitely, I think the tip here is like, if you want it, ask for it and figure it out and plan it ahead of time, but definitely don't go to the beach and light a bonfire. You will get in a ton of trouble in the BVIs.
Yeah, if you want to do it, it's fine. There are ways, but yeah, do it properly.
Yeah.
Weather is obviously a big factor when it comes to sailing, no matter where you are in the world. There's no avoiding it.
Kind of why you're out
there. If you don't like the weather, stay on land or get a powerboat, I guess.
The BVIs is kind of right in the middle, I would say, of the Caribbean. So you get pretty decent trade winds blowing there for the majority of the time, either out of sort of the northeast-ish down to the southeast-ish, and usually around 15 to 25 knots. Not every line squall is going to show up on a weather report, but you can just use your eyes and you see a big gray dark cloud coming towards you, you know it's going to rain. But I think the main point is that the BVIs are far enough north that you can still get low northern depressions coming down, especially in the winter, and they'll flip the wind 180 degrees. So just because they are in the trade winds 95% of the time, and you can get really complacent about that, it is really important still to look at the weather every day, because if one of those low fronts is blowing, all of the anchorages and all of the mooring fields are going to be complete shit. And so you need to be ahead of that and move around and protect yourself in a different place. When we sailed there in Uma, we sailed downwind from west to east in the Caribbean during that section, because we kind of rode like a northern front across, and normally it's upwind. So it doesn't happen very often, but it can happen where the wind shifts basically 180 degrees, and if you're not prepared for it, it can be a real mess.
The thing is, if you're there with your own boat, like we were on Uma the first time, you don't have time restraints, right? So like if you see a northern front coming through, then you can spend a few days just waiting for the right weather to go to the next island. But when you are on a charter, you are on a schedule, so it can be a little bit annoying to have to change your plans. But I mean, that's what the weather is. Like, that's what you are on the boat. You have to kind of like play it by ear.
Yeah, and also just like the wind can shift out of the north and west, hurricanes blow through. Most charter companies sort of shut down during the summer. Some of them still operate, but just because you rent a boat for a week doesn't mean that you'll be able to sail if it's near hurricane season. And as far as we know, there have been named hurricanes that have made landfall every single month of the year over the course of the last 100 years or something. So just because you're not in hurricane season doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a big low blowing across the Atlantic. It can still happen. So it is very important to keep an eye on the weather. Even though the BVI is sort of a small sailing ground and everything's close, it can sneak up on you, and it can get real nasty really quick.
But that said, in general, there is a recommended route when you are sailing in the BVIs, and that's the route that most charter companies are going to recommend, and that's to sail counterclockwise. Because on Uma, again, like it didn't really matter. We were kind of zigzagging everywhere based on what the wind was doing on a day that we felt like sailing. But when you are on a charter and you know you have kind of like a time restraint, then it could be hard to figure out where to go to make it the most efficient week possible. And I know that when we were there in the Odyssey Festival, the route was a little bit messy because we were sailing clockwise.
It kind of went all over the place, actually.
Yeah.
We went that way and then that way.
Back and
that
forth.
way and then that way.
And we weren't in charge of this whole event, so we just went with the entire group.
It was kind of fun to just follow along like a puppy. They're like, oh, we're going here today? Okay.
But I would say that the times that we felt it was the most efficient was when we were sailing counterclockwise, because then you spend the less amount of time sailing upwind. And especially when there's like some heavy wind that can sneak up on you with heavy rain, you don't want to go upwind. It's just uncomfortable.
Sailing upwind in like 25 to 30 knots in these charter catamarans is not pleasant, especially if you're unprotected a little bit from the islands. They bounce and shake and twist, and you kind of have to motor, and yeah, it's not a fun experience. So yeah, counterclockwise, you tend to like tack out, tack into your next location, tack out, tack into your next location. Then you can do like a big downwind loop around the back of the island. So that's generally what people do.
That's actually a really good segue to the next tip, which is to not overthink and overplan your week or 2 weeks or however long you are in the BVIs, because there's a lot to see and do. And if you try to pick exactly, day one, you're going to go to this island, day two, you're going to go visit that, and then you have it exactly as you think you're going to visit, then everything is going to be a mess, because the weather shifts and, unforeseen things happen, and you have to be a little bit more flexible and open to change your plans every single day.
Yeah, I mean, a plan is only as good as you're tied to the dock. And then as soon as you untie your dock lines, just throw the plan out the window. Because the mooring field might be full, or the weather might shift, or it might be too swelly, or somebody might get sick, or you might have forgotten the coffee creamer, or whatever the thing is. And we've learned over the years to lower your expectations about whatever country you're going to. Because if you plan and plan and plan, and you've found all the places you want to go, and you have a schedule, like your expectation for what that place is going to be is grossly inflated usually. And then you get there and you're like, oh, it's raining today, the beach bar's closed, or whatever the thing is. So if you lower your expectations, not in a negative way, but just in like if you open your expectations, then all of a sudden you get there and a lot of things happen by accident or by surprise or without being planned. And those are the things that exceed your expectations if they're low. And so you have a lot more fun, we found.
It's such a small place that everything is a couple hour maximum sail from each other. So even if you had emergencies to go back to the main town to do groceries, or you had some repairs to do back in the main port, then you can always just take one day off, do the thing you need to do, and go right back to where you were.
Yeah, and there's ferries that go back and forth to the main island, and if you're on a charter boat, like if you have motors, you're never more than like a 2-hour motor back. So yeah, if you really do have to, or you really did forget something, or someone really does want to get off the boat for some reason, or you need to pick somebody up, you just motor back, do the thing, and then head back out to where you were. Yeah.
So all this to say, don't stress about where you need to be every day based on what you thought you would be doing every day. Just lower your expectations and don't overplan your trip, and be open for surprises.
Yeah.
And then just go with the flow, basically.
It's a great way to travel in general.
Yeah.
For us, at least, we live on a sailboat and travel on a sailboat because we like the isolation. And so even when we're in a popular cruising ground like the BVI, on a charter boat during peak season with 20 people on board, sounds maybe a bit weird, but we still try to avoid the crowds.
If you are going to a place that's already popular, just go first thing in the morning, because charters have like a time that they kind of leave the last mooring ball to start exploring during the day, and just beat them to it. Just wake up earlier and go.
Yeah, I'd say if you think about what the average person might do, they're going to wake up, they're going to eat breakfast, they're going to prep the boat to get ready, and then they're going to go out to the adventure that day, the Bats, the Indians, the Dogs, Monkey Point, like snorkel spots. Then maybe do the opposite and wake up super early, leave, and then have breakfast when you get there, or have breakfast along the way. But I mean, I guess if more people watch this video, then it's gonna get and everyone's gonna wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and motor out to the mooring balls and the dive spots, and then you're gonna be left in an empty mooring field having breakfast. So
we can split it 50-50. The other way you could do it as well is wait till all the charter boats are gone, and then you can enjoy it in the afternoon, which is what we did on Uma, and it was what we did. Honestly, during the Odyssey Festival, that's what we did for the bath. So we waited till early afternoon, and then we went to explore.
We also, at the Uma Nation meetup, so there's two other ways to avoid crowds. One is for popular spots like the Bads. Check the harbor at Road Town and see if there's any cruise ships scheduled. Because if they're coming in the afternoon, you can go in the morning. If they're scheduled to leave at noon, you can go in the afternoon. And that will help avoid like a big bulk of people. And then the other way is most charter companies have a turnaround, and it's either Saturday or Sunday usually. And so if you can rent your boat on Thursday or Friday and just shift it by a little bit, then you'll be a day ahead of everybody else. We noticed that at the Illumination meetup because we rented it 2 days early. And so because most people do counterclockwise, we were at the baths pretty much empty, and there was no cruise ship that day. And then when we left, we saw like the charter boats coming in the next day. And when we were up by Bitter End, all the charter boats were going out to Anegada, and we were going across. So we were always like a day ahead of this bulk of like 30 or 40 boats.
That's actually probably the biggest tip then.
Yeah,
just rent your boat a day before everybody else rents their boat.
If you can, ask the charter company what the turnaround is, and then ask if you can like shift it by a day or two, or just skip the first thing and go straight to the baths on day one or something like that. And so if you just shift your schedule by a day or two, there's usually a bulk of boats that are all doing the same thing on the same days.
Yeah.
And then you can avoid that as well. As we've mentioned a couple of times in sort of passing, the BVIs is a relatively small cruising ground, and there are very well-known mooring fields and anchorages around that sort of everybody knows is in the cruising guides. But there are still enough corners and enough backsides of islands that you can find some isolation. So we're not going to give away our favorite secret spots because then everybody would know about them. But if you look at the charts and look at the wind and look at depth and kind of make your own judgment call, you can usually find places in isolation that aren't massive mooring fields filled with dozens and dozens of boats. And since everything's close anyway, if you do want to go back around to that beach bar at night or something, you can take the dinghy. And that way you can kind of have a little bit of isolation.
Yeah. For example, did you know there's another island that is next to where the baths are that looks exactly like the baths? It's a little bit smaller.
It's not as good.
No, but
it's similar, but it's not as good.
If let's say that there's a cruise ship that day and it's like overcrowded and all the charters are there and you're like, oh, but I just want to see something similar, then go to the island that's next to it. Look at the charts.
2 mooring balls there. 2
mooring balls. Grab one. And then go to shore and then just like climb around on rocks and stuff.
Yeah.
And you get most of the time, the whole place for yourself.
Don't have your if you know what the baths are, don't have your expectations set as high as the baths. It's not nearly as cool, but it is still an island covered in rocks you can climb around on.
Yeah.
And you can wait for all the charter boats to leave and then come in late.
I guess our next tip would be about Wi-Fi. I know we live in a world where everybody is glued to their phones, and I would say the reason to get a vacation and charter boat is to stay disconnected. Mm-hmm. So try to stay disconnected, basically. I know it's a cheesy tip, but Wi-Fi in the BVIs, even if you get a local SIM card, it's pretty bad anyway.
Especially in those remote secret spot anchorages we're talking about, which are on like the other side of islands, and the islands block the cell signal. So a lot of times we didn't get cell signal, even if we had like the charter Wi-Fi on board. Yeah,
when we were there on Uma, we would steal the Wi-Fi from charter boats that had a router on board. Mm-hmm. But we realized also that the Wi-Fi is already so slow that it doesn't really make sense. You're spending all day just Googling where to go instead of actually just going there.
Yeah, just go to shore and explore and ask people, like, hey, where's the best bar around town? Or like, where's the gas station? I mean, everybody knows everything there. Mm-hmm. And I think in general, asking a local what there is to do or where to go is probably much better than Googling it anyway, because you get to meet somebody and have a conversation. If you do need cell signal while you're there to check weather, check wind, these types of things, or, some people do have to do some work even on vacation.
Upload a video,
I would say if you have a little bit of time before, you can go get a local SIM. They're not that expensive, and you don't need to be a resident to get like a 2-week SIM card. Mm-hmm. We've done that before. In Road Town, there's cell phone stores. You can just go in and buy one. Charter companies, if you ask for it, will give you a Wi-Fi router that works off of cell network as well. And it's fine. It's good enough. I mean, you're not uploading videos on it, but if you need to check weather, check email, make phone calls, it's fine. But you're not always going to get cell signal when you're around the backside of islands and stuff like that. So just disconnect. You're on vacation. you're on vacation.
Just explore, just
Yeah.
go slow. And in speaking of going slow, a good segue to our next point, which is sometimes it just stay on the boat.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, the BVIs, everything is beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful things to see, but sometimes just taking a rest day and just stay on board is the most magical thing you can do.
I think the two extremes of that were last year at the Odyssey Festival when we were on a quite tight schedule to go here, go there, do this. Like, it was super fun, but us as cruisers were like, we're doing all of that in a week, you know?
Yeah.
And then
That's 2 months.
yeah, restaurants here and bars there and everything. And then a couple of weeks later, when we were on the Cat with Bo and Brandy and Maya, we did 3 things in 9 days. Like, we didn't do, and we did the baths and we did Bitter and Yacht Club. That was it.
And then we anchored somewhere and went for a hike.
Yeah, we didn't do any. We spent like 3 nights in the same anchorage, which I don't think anybody does in the BVIs. But that to say, like, you've rented this boat, you're floating out in Anchorage. It's an experience that most people don't get to go and do. And so, at least for us, this is a bit more of a personal tip, I guess. But you can go to a beach bar by land, you know, but you can't go out on anchor in a car. And so when we're on a boat, we just really like to enjoy being on the boat and hanging out with the people who chose to come with you on that trip, watching the sunset, having a sundowner, eating good food, especially when we have a private chef on board. It's just like we've got the best view and the best food and the best restaurant in all the islands on our boat. So like, why would we want to ever leave?
No matter how many days you're planning on chartering a boat, try to have the last day be kind of a rest. Stay at anchor day, because you, instead of just resting on the plane, then you have 1 day to just relax before you give away the boat.
I think our last day at the Uma Nation meetup was probably everyone's favorite day. I mean, to some degree. We had a good day the day before, and then we tied up to the rocks, and then we kind of were a whole day early, but that little spot in Norman's, you're just so close to the caves, you're so close to the Indians, you're right by Willie T's. It was really nice to just, for everyone to just know that we were staying there for 2 nights and just relaxing and not having to worry about moving and packing and organizing and stuff. And then in the morning, we're like a 1-hour motor sail back to the marina. So the BVIs is small, but it's also big enough you can't do all of it in a week. And so, you know, picking some favorites, but then just relaxing. You're on vacation, you know, enjoy the sunset on the boat. Our last tip, and this is going to be controversial considering we've been sailing on a monohull for 10 years. We love monohulls. We actually prefer them over catamarans, and we're sitting on one right now.
Unless
you're on a charter boat with 16 people, and then we actually prefer catamarans when we're renting boats for several reasons. And again, this is quite personal, and it depends on what you're doing. Because if we were going to be the 2 of us with a couple of friends out for the week, and there's only 5 of us on board, and we're all, you know, close family or close friends, we'd probably get a monohull, especially if your budget's lower. You can get monohulls pretty inexpensive for the week. But when you're putting a bunch of people on board, including a cook, and you're choosing sketchy anchorages that are exposed to swell, we really like the larger catamarans.
monohulls are not the most comfortable thing to be at on anchor. Catamarans are more comfortable, hands down.
Like 95% of sea states, a catamaran is going to be more comfortable on anchor.
So if you are on a boat with a bunch of people that never sailed before, or they're not quite sure if they're going to get seasick, I think a catamaran makes a big difference because you're more comfortable, you're more stable, and then you have more open space for people to kind of breathe. And that's the first thing about catamarans and chartering.
That sort of ties into the second point, which is like, for us on these larger events, we have a lot of people on board. Catamarans just offer more space to sort of have a bit of alone time, so to speak. When you're putting that many people in a confined space for a whole week and there's no real way to like escape. I mean, monos have their cabins, but there's still sort of one room. And there's a cockpit and there's downstairs and that's it. Where on these larger cats, there's like the main salon, there's the forward deck area, there's above, and then there's the cabin. So even when we had
14 people,
like it still kind of feels empty on these boats because they're so big.
And personally, like when it comes to the BVIs, the boat availability, like we love the Balis because you can open up the space even more. Like you can connect
with the whole
outside,
back garage
inside.
thing? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
awesome.
we always try to choose a Bali because you have more airflow, you have more space.
I don't think we ever closed those doors in the whole 9 days we were there. The good part is companies like Navigare have full fleets of boats from small monohulls all the way up to massive catamarans. So it really just depends on your group of people that you're planning to go with. You can just pick the right boat for your size and go with it. But yeah, from our perspective, being in the BVIs 4 times now, a lot of the places where you can grab a mooring ball, especially at the parks like the baths, they're quite open to swell. And so on a catamaran, we're very stable and we can spend the night. And on monos, you just see them just like rocking back and forth. And since they're not on the boats, they don't really care, but then they have to like I don't think I've ever seen a monohull anchored just north of the baths because that's a very swelly spot.
I mean,
That's
we were
always
there.
catamarans.
We were there with our boat, and
Yeah,
it was
but
always swelling.
We were just like, it was rough.
You don't feel like you don't feel like you're moving so much on the boat, and then you get on the dinghy and you look and you see the mast going this way. You're like, holy cow, that's intense. My first time driving a sailing catamaran was in the BVIs for the Odyssey Festival.
So Bali 54. It's like the largest one.
When I got on the boat, I was a little bit nervous because I was like, well, this is the biggest boat, and this is the first time on a catamaran. How is it like? I don't really have those skills.
Yeah.
And then I realized how easy it is to maneuver a catamaran. And there's a reason why we're putting 2 Oceanboat motors on our boat is because then it'll be kind of like a catamaran.
Only better, I think, because we'll have like no windage and 2 motors.
Yeah. But on a catamaran, it's so much easier to grab a mooring ball. It's easier to get back at the dock. And honestly, I think it's also easier to anchor.
Yeah.
If you know how to keep the boat steady, it's easy because you don't get affected by that wind so much.
Yeah. And even though these boats are massive, like the engines are also massive. And so you have a lot more, every time we go out on one of these festivals, we usually spend a day like teaching everyone how to drive the boat, teaching everyone how to sail the boat, teaching everyone how to grab a mooring ball, teaching everyone how to tie a cleat. And so it's much more intuitive, I find, for people who've never driven a boat before to have like a steering wheel and 2 throttles. And when you do something, the boat responds. Whereas on a monohull, you know, you gotta have a tiller or a helm, but then there's usually a bit more of a lag, and then the boat's moving, and then, you know, there's momentum and prop walk and everything else you have to deal with. And so personally, I'd rather dock a catamaran in 25 knots of wind, even a big, massive Bali, than a monohull in 25 knots of wind in a crowded marina. They're just so much more maneuverable. But the good news is these charter companies like Navigare, the first time we were there with a boat from them, they undocked and docked us because the wind was blowing like 30 knots.
And you can just ask them and they'll be happy to do so.
They're very happy to do so because if you're at all unconfident in your docking abilities, it's much better to have somebody else do that for you. And then the rest of the week you can just spend anchoring and grabbing mooring balls where there's nothing to hit because it's easier for them to jump on the boat and take you off the dock and not hit anything than it is for you to have some ego about like, I could drive a boat and then you can't and then you damage on day 1 and that's a mess. There's really there's no room for egos on sailboats because they will kick your ass. And then the second time on the Bali 48, the wind was much lighter and I had a lot more experience driving catamarans by then. So it was much easier and we were on an end dock. So yeah, Luke and Margot took their boat out. I took ours out. And then coming back in when we were docking the second time we filled up at the fuel dock and then we had to go and redock the boats further into the marina. And one of the dock hands came with and we jumped off. He's like, do you want a job here? I was like, no, I'm good. But yeah, it was nice. It was nice to feel confident on one of those boats. But yeah, driving a catamaran 3 times, way more confident docking it than even our boat after 10 years of not docking it, I guess. We probably docked catamarans more than we've docked.
I don't like docking our boat. Like that's why we anchor so much.
It's gonna be awesome when we get the twin engine.
I think the most docking that I've done on Uma was in Norway, and that was my practicing, which wasn't always the simplest thing because of the wind and the snow.
We've also had like limited motoring ability every time in the last 10 years. So this rebuild's gonna be different because we're gonna have a lot more batteries and 2 motors and we'll be able to probably do some docking practice after.
We're basically taking all the notes that we've learned sailing catamarans and just applying as much as we can on our
360
monohull.
visibility and your close protection. I want twin motors. I want water maker, air conditioning, big fridge, freezer. Oh, we need a private chef. Well, we have a space for it. So
I have a private chef. I don't know what you're going to do.
That's true.
It's like
well, I guess that was 10 tips. That's sort of like a minimum list. We could obviously do 100 videos about little tips and tricks about sailing and in the BVIs particularly because it's the only place we've been back to more than once. So we know it the best out of all the places we've been. However, like, yeah, a lot of the joy of these adventures is going out and, you know, exploring the unknown, so to speak. So to kind of sum it all up, you know, it's important to plan and make sure you have what you need, but then also plan for like surprises. Openness in your schedule. Yeah, plan for some surprises. Don't over plan so you can just enjoy the experience once you get there.
Yeah, and also respect the island. Like, we're all visitors, and all of these places that we go to, just try to leave it as a better place than when you were there.
Yeah. We're all there on boats for the same reason, you know, to enjoy sunsets, have a sundowner, have fun, you know, explore a bit. And so have a little bit of respect, have a little bit of common sense.
Be nice to people.
Yeah, little golden rule, you know, just because you're a cruiser and they're a charter, or you're a charter and they're a cruiser or whatever, like have a bit of respect for other boaters as well. And leave the island better than you found it. Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoy this video and some of the tips are helpful if you're gonna ever be in the BVIs. And we'll see you guys next week when we get back to
doing this,
turning our boat into a catamaran. All right, guys. Cheers.